Hey, if you've ever felt like an outsider in wine conversations, you love to host friends like a pro, and you need approachable, holistic wine education, then you've come to the right spot. You know that feeling when you're in a restaurant and the wine list looks like a foreign language, or you're stuck buying the same old wine at the store because it just feels safe? Well, trust me, I've been there too. But here's the secret sauce. Knowing the difference between Old World and New World wines will seriously change your wine life. Today, we're breaking it all down in a way that's fun and it's totally approachable for your next dinner party or get together. Hi, I'm Ann Kjellgren, your wine PhD, coming to you today to talk about Old and New World wines. Did you know that understanding the differences between Old and New World wines will help you navigate wine shops, make more sense out of a restaurant wine menu? It'll help you gain a better understanding and confidence about wines because there's no more guesswork. And that means no more pouring money down the drain on wines that you just don't love. So let me bring up a couple of graphics I'd like to share with you about Old and New World wines. Oh, so starting with Old World wines, wines from traditional European regions such as France, Italy, Spain, etc. The easiest way to figure this out right away is to ask the question, is this a country that has been a monarchy or has been colonized in the last 250 years? If they've been a monarchy, then we're in the Old World. So having a monarchy, by that I mean having a king or queen, something like that. So we're talking about England, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Austria, Greece, it goes on and on and on. But you get the idea. So essentially, and you can see it in the graphic here, we're mainly talking about Western Europe. These countries have been making wines for well over 400 years. The wines are typically labeled by place, or as I have it here, location or origin. So you're going to see things like Chianti or Chablis, and both of those are the names of villages. Those are not types of grape, but it is a place name that is used as a point of distinction, which makes those wines more valuable in their home country. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that kind of came to be. Old World wines will have stricter wine laws, and they're known for their vintages. And what I mean by that is vintage is simply the year of the wine. So you'll hear things like it's a 2018 Bordeaux, or it's a 2006 Chateau de Chem. What the year refers to and why that's important is that people who follow wine will know what the weather, what the terroir was like in that area for that vintage year. And so they know that there's a difference from one year to the next between better or lesser quality wines. So it's very important to understand that the wine laws being so strict, and in fact, a lot of the European wines tend to be organic, or even if they're not certified organic, they have been produced in such a way that they could be designated as organic, but for whatever reason, maybe the winery owner or the winemaker didn't want to have to deal with the government paperwork or all the hoops and things they had to go through to be designated as organic. But it's very common that in Europe, and again, this is because of the wine law, that there's absolutely nothing that they can add in many cases to the wines. And so what goes into the bottle is essentially what came out of the ground. As opposed to what we're going to see in a minute with the New World wines, where they're able to be a little bit more creative with their wines in trying to make them essentially taste the same from year to year. European wines are not like that. You can go to the same maker, to the same everything, but if it's a different year, it's probably going to have a slightly or vastly different flavor profile. And finally, the last point is that wines tend to taste more complex in Old World wines. A lot of times you're going to get more minerality. You possibly can get things that are more earthy. You definitely are going to see a lot more acid in Old World wines, as well as your reds are going to be lighter in most cases. But here's kind of a fun little way to remember the character, if you will, of Old World wines. It's been said that Old World wines are like the classic little black dress. It's elegant, it's timeless, and it's always in style. It tells a story of where they came from in every glass. So it has a story to tell. Now let's go over and take a look at the New World wines and compare. New World wines, again, are from regions that have been colonized in the last 250 years. So that includes, let me there we go. So you can see here on the map that there's dots all over the place. But let me tell you again how we came up with that. So these are areas that the wine regions are those countries that have been colonized within the last 250 years. So again, they would have been under a monarchy. They would have been the holding of England or Portugal or Spain or France or even Italy, something like that. So you're going to see, as you can tell on the map, the United States, Australia, Chile, South Africa, all of the New World wine regions. Let me go ahead and advance this one again so you can see So winemaking in these countries began in the last 200 years. As we mentioned, they're colonized. The wines, though, tend to be labeled by grape. This is different from the Old World, which of course is labeled by place. So in the New World, this was led primarily by the Americans who said, let's make this really simple. Let's go ahead and label our wines by grape type. Now, you're probably thinking, why in the world did the Europeans make it that difficult in the first place? Well, basically, what happened is that all the grapes grew together up until probably the last 150 years. So when you went into the field, you had Cabernet Franc growing alongside of Sauvignon Blanc. So I just named a red grape and a white grape. You had them in the same field, and they were probably even all tangled up together. And so when they harvested, they just harvested whatever grew, and then they produced wine. And this, by the way, is how this is, by the way, how Cabernet Sauvignon was created, in that there was Cabernet Franc, and Sauvignon Blanc in the same field. They cross-pollinated and created, from a white grape and a red grape, they produced a red grape, a very tannic red grape, Cabernet Sauvignon. So there's a fun fact for you. So going back in history, if you had someone who was, say, from Chablis, they would have grown up in that area. They would have probably never traveled more than about 10 miles from their home. And what they knew was that in that area of Chablis, which, if you don't know geography, is pretty close to Champagne, there's a lot of Chardonnay. And they knew that in Chablis there was Chardonnay, in Reims there was Chardonnay, in all these different small towns around the area, they were growing Chardonnay. So it wasn't enough to say that this is a Chardonnay grape, because again, everybody had Chardonnay. And then the second item is that there were grapes growing together. So the way that people hundreds of years ago could discern one wine from the next wasn't by grape, it was by the village where it came from. So they knew a Chardonnay in Chablis tasted one way, a Champagne in Reims tasted another, and so on and so on. Same thing in Italy. You go to Chianti, you're drinking a Sangiovese blend. So if you go to any of the other villages around Chianti, They're also going to be made from Sangiovese, most likely, and also similar blends, but it's going to be different because the terroir is different. The location is different, the aspect, meaning how much sun, rain, if there's hail, just all kinds of different things. The terroir is different. And so the wines are different. And so they've developed a reputation by village. All right, but we are in the new world where we're saying we're making this a lot easier. We're just putting the name of the grape on the wine and we're calling it good, right? So the next item is that in the new world is filled with a bunch of mavericks, right? We've got lots of creative people who are wanting to push the boundaries and do new and creative things with winemaking. And part of this is because, so on one hand, we've got people creating new and exciting flavors. On the other, though, New World countries have buyers who want to know that their wines will taste consistent from year to year. So just like we have in the food industry, where we want to know that when we buy a chicken sandwich in California, it's going to taste exactly the same at that same restaurant in Chicago or New York or Miami. We have that consistency. This is what's been created in the New World with winemaking. And because the New World wine regions do not have, thousands of years of tradition, the wine laws aren't quite so strict and they do allow for some creativity. However, what that can mean is that there can be more additives in the wine, but that's the trade-off. And then finally, this last bullet point, flavors tend to be more fruity and approachable. So as Old World wines tend to be more complex, New World wines tend to be very fruity, approachable, almost punchy, if you will. And a lot of this has to do, if we go back to the map, you'll see that with the exception of Canada, most of these countries, so again, the United States is in California, then we're looking at South America, looking at South Africa, and we're looking at the southern regions of Australia, which is going to be warmer climate because southern hemisphere flips upside down. So my point being that all these New World wine regions, most of them, have a much warmer climate than, say, Western Europe. So those grapes in the New World wine regions are going to be more mature. How do I say that? In the New World wine regions are going to be much more ripe fruit, which means that fruit has a lot more sugar. And by definition, grapes with more sugar are going to produce wines with higher levels of alcohol. So if you're someone who's looking for less alcohol by volume in the wines that you drink, you're going to probably want to favor Old World wines. If you enjoy the higher alcohol levels and the fruity flavors and more the boldness, you're going to enjoy the New World wines. And it's been said that New World wines are like the designer statement pieces. They're bold, they're expressive, and they love being at the center of attention at any party. So we've got the classic little black dress for the Old World, and we have the exciting, flashy pieces, if you will, that represent New World. So we've talked about the flavor profiles. So again, just real quickly, Old World flavor profiles are earthy, mineral-driven, balanced by acidity. Old World wines tend to be better with foods. We're going to see higher acid levels, but we're also going to see acid levels that are balanced well with the tannins. For example, you can take a Bordeaux wine, which is going to have notes of leather, tobacco, and really pretty subtle fruit, as opposed to New World wines, which will present with bold, fruit-driven flavors, often with some oakiness, which will come out as flavors of vanilla, possibly spice. So an example of that would be a Napa Cabernet that's bursting with blackberries and vanilla. That shows you that you not only have really ripe fruit, but that it has been oaked, probably in new oak, and that's why you're getting the vanilla flavors. One of the things is that when you're, again, comparing Old World, New World, Old World is very subtle. It's like having an intellectual conversation. You have to pay attention. You have to listen a little closer. You have to catch all the nuances and innuendo. But when you get it, it's amazing. On the other hand, New World wines are more like that friend who walks into the room and everybody instantly notices them. They're excited to see them. They make a statement and they keep the energy high. So why does this matter for you as a consumer of wine? Well, the reason this is the first episode is that understanding the difference between Old World and New World wines, you'll know why your favorite Chardonnay from California tastes so different than one from Burgundy. People think, oh, I don't like Chardonnay. You have no idea if you don't like Chardonnay, most likely, because you've probably only tried one style, and most likely it's probably a California buttery or oaky Chardonnay. There are Chardonnays from all over the world that have very different flavor profiles. And this is one of those ways that you can kind of guide yourself through the wine shop, through the wine menu at the restaurant to know which one you're getting. So if you like something that's a little bit more subtle, a little bit more mineral, and maybe a little bit creamy, and by creamy, I don't mean buttery, I mean the opposite of tart. So like a nice soft Chardonnay with some minerality and things like that, that would be from Burgundy, specifically from Chablis, but you can also get something even a little bit less than from Burgundy. But if you do like the big, bold, buttery oak Chardonnays, then knock yourself out. But you're going to want to stay New World, primarily California, but you can bounce around with some of the ones, say, from South America or possibly, Australia, and possibly even a little bit from South Africa. So know that the difference between Old World and New World is not about the price. It's about the winemaking philosophy, the climates, and the traditions that are behind it. And this knowledge will help you pick out wines you love pretty much every time. You're not going to have the second guessing. You're not going to have the buyer's remorse. And when it comes to food pairing, as I mentioned, Old World wines often pair better with food just because they've got higher acidity and they've got more structure, while New World wines tend to be used more as a standalone patio sipper or with bolder flavors. You'll see New World wines used a lot for things like steaks, barbecue, grilled food, things that have like really intense cooking methods. You'll see New World wines with quite often. So with this knowledge, you're going to be the one that everyone turns to when the restaurant wine list hits the table or when your friends need help finding the perfect wine for dinner. So real quick, how do you spot wines, New World versus Old World wines, when you're looking at wines in the wine shop? So let me bring back the presentation. And let's go. Oh, okay. 1 second. Okay, so let's share our screen. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can see the next piece of information on our wine labels. Okay, so here we've got wine labels from the Old World. In this particular image, we're looking at a French wine label. So on the left side, what people would say is the front of the wine bottle, you can see that at the top, It's got Edward Delany, which is the producer. It's got the vineyard in the center. Underneath that, it says Bourgogne au de Nuit. So what we've got going on there is that saying it's from Burgundy and it's from the Côte de Nuit, but it's from a specific wine region that is higher up in the altitudes. So we've got a vintage of 2020. We've got a bottle size, which is normal for the standard bottle of wine, which is 750 milliliters. And this one is a little bit higher than we normally see for old world wines, but it's not crazy high, but it's just kind of more average, above average, so at 14%. And again, the subregion is on the back, but it was also on the front. So we've got it underneath Le Roir, and then we've got it at the very top on the back of the label. And this one looks like it's got a little bit more detail in French, and then they've got the translation in English. So that's actually quite nice. They don't actually have to do that. Everything like that is really more marketing. The only thing that's really required is to tell you where the wine is from. This is a vin de Bourgogne, which means that it is a wine of Burgundy, which has a specific legal meaning. And then within Burgundy, like I said, it's from the Côte de Nuit. And then within the Côte de Nuit, it's from the Haut Côte de Nuit, which is, again, anytime you see this O that precedes a French wine region, you're going to see this in Bordeaux quite a bit. That means that it's just right behind the main regions and it's up in altitude a little bit. So it's above average wine. It's not, you're not going to probably find a Premier Cru necessarily. If you look closely, you'll see that this one, even though it's French, will actually tell you it's 100% Pinot Noir. I would say that's kind of 50-50. We're seeing it more and more because as people can understand what is inside the wine bottle, they're more likely to buy it. So European producers are very motivated to try to make it easy for people. And then, of course, 2020 is the vintage. Now, does that mean the year it's bottled, the year it's pulled out of the field? What does that mean? It's the year it's harvested. So generally, depending on the region, August, September, October, somewhere in there of 2020 is when the grapes were harvested. As I said, old world wines do not show the name of the grape necessarily. This one actually does. By law, the producer, classification, vintage, and region subregions must be included, and all information will be on the front label. Now, as funny as that sounds, the one on the right is actually the front label. The one on the left is technically the back label. Why in the world would that be? Well, because the one on the right shows all of the legal information that is required by law. The one on the left is simply marketing. It's advertising. So the one that we think of as the front is actually the back. One thing you'll notice about old world wine labels, though, is this one's pretty fancy for a French bottle. A lot of times you'll just get the name of the producer and the basic facts. You don't always get actual artwork. Now, by contrast, the New World wine label, and this is, so here we're talking about AVAs, which are American viticultural areas. They're used as appellations of origin, which is the term that they use on European bottles. So you're also going to see some geographic descriptions. You're also sometimes going to see climatic features of a wine's origin. And AVAs tend to be defined by political boundaries, like a county, a state, or country. But more and more, we're starting to see different areas that are being defined as an AVA. And what I mean by that is if you get a group of winemakers who are in a general area and they all are consistently creating wines that are distinct from everyone else, but similar to each other, they're going to be able to apply for an AVA status. There is no one that goes around and decides that this AVA is going to go here and this AVA is going to go there. It's purely from the winemakers themselves. They apply for it. It usually takes a few years, but once they're able to establish those things that I just mentioned, then they're going to be recognized as an AVA. So I got a little bit off topic, but let's go ahead and look at the label. Starting with number 1, you see, I'm not sure, but I'm going to guess it's Jaxi. That is the brand name. That is the wine producer. Going down, Reserve. Now this one's a little tricky. When you see this on a European bottle, you'll see like Reserva. That actually means something from a legal perspective, meaning that it's been aged for a certain amount of time or it's followed other laws about the growing and how far apart the rows are and things like that. In the United States, Reserve generally means it's one of their better cuvées, but there's nothing legally that regulates it. So I don't say that to make light of it, but I just say for the most part, it's going to be their better wine. But again, there's nothing legally to enforce that that's the case. They could technically put that on any bottle of wine. Going down the label, you'll see 2012, which is the vintage, again, the year the grapes were harvested. Now, estate bottle, that's interesting. You're going to see that on both Old and New World. All that estate bottled means is that, and you'll see it here in the notes, that 100% of the grapes are grown, crushed, fermented, and finished, and even bottled on the same property. That's kind of unusual. It's also very common that someone will grow the grapes in one place, they'll ship them somewhere else to be processed and maybe even sent somewhere else to be bottled. This has all been done on property. And generally that's seen as something that's done by a higher quality producer or for a higher quality group of wine. Continuing down, we see, of course, Cabernet Sauvignon, which is our grape. Ghost Story. If you didn't know, you might think, why in the world is Ghost Story there? In this case, it's a marketing term. Sometimes you'll see the next line down, which is where they'll put which plot of land it came from. So again, you'll see on number 7 to the left, it says vineyard designation. When they do that, as this says, in California, 95% of the grapes must come from that vineyard. In other countries, it's a different wine law, it's a different requirement. But in California, where this wine was produced, if they say a specific vineyard, then 95% of the grapes have to come from that vineyard. The other 5% can come from anywhere in California. Can't come from Washington State, but as long as it comes from California, you're good. Appellation, again, is just a fancy name for place. So this comes from St. Helena in Napa Valley. And your alcohol content, finally, is 14.1% by volume. So funny, I picked 2 wines that actually show as both 14%. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So one of the things that you're going to see that we saw on the Old World label is that you're going to see less emphasis on the grape, although ours did show that it was 100% Pinot Noir. Again, with European things and subtlety, it could be said that labels are kind of like understanding the inside joke. They don't always tell you what all the things are. You kind of have to learn it on your own. But once you understand it, it's one of those things that you kind of feel like you're on the inside and you kind of know it all. But it's not hard. I mean, I just ran you through it. It's not that difficult. And just what I gave you now, you can probably go in anywhere, pick up a bottle and get 80% of it with no problem. The other 20% would just be repetition and more study with me or someone like me. So label cues for the New World. So now we're going back to that California wine label that we were just looking at. You've got your grape variety front and center. And that's what we saw with that wine. It had the wine Cabernet Sauvignon in red letters right in the middle of the label. You've got flashier, more modern label designs. And again, since I love my metaphors, New World wines love to flaunt their personality right on the label. So there's no guessing games here. They tell you exactly what to expect. So if you're up for it, I'm going to challenge you to grab a couple of wines, same varietal. So you're going to want 2 Chardonnays, 2 Cabernet Sauvignons, 2 Pinot Noirs, whatever floats your boat, whatever makes you happy. Pinot Noir would be a good choice because you're going to see some definite differences. Chardonnay would also be a great choice. And all 3 that I mentioned actually would all be good samples to do. But my challenge is this. I'm going to be holding a Zoom workshop that you can register for down below in the show notes. And I'm going to be bringing in 2 wines, and I'm going to go through with you actually the experience side of this, because I've just given you a bunch of facts, and that's terrific. But if you really want to learn wine, you've got to experience it, you've got to taste it, you've got to sense it, and it helps when you've got someone walking you through it. It's far more effective to up your wine game and learn your knowledge when you're actually trying it, because wine is an experiential thing. So if you want to grab 2 bottles of wine and register for the workshop down below, then we are going to go through those 2 bottles of the same variety on November 23rd at 4 p.m. Eastern. So that's going to be 1 p.m. Pacific. As I mentioned, registration information is in the show notes below, and we'll be discussing differences in body, flavor, and structure. And by the end of this, you'll be able to tell the difference between a Pinot Noir from Burgundy and one from Oregon with just a sip. I mean, seriously, this knowledge is that powerful. So, one quick recap. Old World is about tradition, nuance, and terroir. And New World is all about being bold and fruit-driven and expressive. So now that you know the basics, next time you're in a wine shop, you too are going to feel confident about picking something you love, whether it's that sleek Old World bottle or a bold New World favorite. Wine does not have to be intimidating, and it's way more fun when you can explore the whole world of flavors that are out there. I really encourage you to leave the safety of your favorite wine and try some new wines that are out there. So if you want to dive deeper and really become an expert in your wine, then I invite you to my upcoming class. We'll be exploring those wines side by side like I explained, breaking it down in even more detail. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. So please click the registration link below to learn more. As you may have heard me say before, but you'll definitely hear me say again, wine is an art. It's science, it's history, and culture, all rolled into one glass. And once you understand that, you are unstoppable. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I can't wait to help you explore more of the world of wine. Also, if you've enjoyed this content, please join my Facebook group so you can receive all the goodies, be part of the discussion, and get the 411 on wine from beginner to go-to expert. So until next time, I'm Kjellgren, your wine PhD. Cheers!